screen. We are now live, which means if you are watching this on YouTube, sorry, if you're a subscriber, you will have gotten the notification that we are now live. If you are not watching this because you haven't got a notification, that's because you're not a subscriber and you haven't hit the bell and you haven't done those fun things to kind of know that we're live each and every Sunday and when we do our live streams. So please do go to the bottom, hit subscribe, and of course do let everyone know that we are now going to be hitting our show in about 2 minutes 45. We are streaming to all the major platforms, which means we're going to Twitter Periscope. We're going to Twitch. So if you are a Twitch subscriber, thank you very much indeed for that support. And also we're on YouTube as well. That's the best place, of course, to get all the comments in. So please do jump in on that. If there's anything that you want to ask of our guests or anything that you want to discuss when it comes to Comic-Cons, because we are going to get into stuff like next week's open registration badge sale for San Diego Comic-Con. We're going to get into some things as we head into the final stretch of 2019. We've got ourselves Thought Bubble, of course, we're going to talk about a bit later. And we have ourselves our guest, which we're going to be talking to BRYANT and BARBRA DILLON from FANBASE Press. Any questions you want to put to them, jump in and do make any comments that you want to put in, and also any questions. The other thing we're going to get into as well, or what I'd like to get into and just mention, this week we did actually have our Patreon payout at the beginning of the month, which allowed us to pay our hosting bill for the site and also for the various streaming things that we do. Thank you so much indeed to everybody who supported on our Patreon. I will say that we usually do an after show, and that's usually down to anything that we got planned, whether I actually get the chance to do the after show. I will decide whether I'm going to do one halfway through this stream because I am fraying at the edges. This has been a long weekend. This has been a marathon. This has been something else, but we're definitely going to get into all of that. Andrew English is saying hello from London. He was at Thought Bubble, so very curious to hear what his thoughts on the show were. Into the Blue Mister, hello, afternoon. It's dark and wet out there. Well, I mean, the sun's been and gone here in the UK. If you're watching in the US, good morning. Thank you very much indeed for taking time. Indeed, Aaron Neighbors is watching. Hello, or hola, from sunny San Diego. Well, you know, this is where jealousy kicks in, and I just hate you because I want to be in San Diego. It's as simple as that. I love the town. You know, we were talking about this with a number of people because the Thought Bubble did have a number of US guests talking about their plans for July next year. Some people that I think I might be able to announce that will be appearing next year. Really great. They talking about the city, and yeah, it got me very nostalgic, and all the business about being jealous about not being there this year. That was all fun and games. But anyway, we're going to get into all of that. Thank you very much indeed to everybody who supports us on Patreon, and we really appreciate all the help that you provide us for the show. So there we go. Right, let's dive into it then. Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to San Diego, to An Englishman in San Diego. This is Cup of Tea, Talking Con, where each and every week from 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT, we talk Comic-Cons, we talk con culture, we talk all the things and stuff and nonsense that are happening in pop culture. We may get into The Mandalorian and all the things that's happening with Disney Plus when it launches on Tuesday. Do that a little bit later. So lots of things to get into today. But thank you very much indeed for joining us. Once again, we are on YouTube, so that's probably the best place to get your comments in. We're looking at the comment stream as they're coming in. Thank you very much indeed to Sir Smeg saying hello. He's well, I mean, there's the usual banter. Everyone's talking to each other at this point. So we've got Andrew saying hi to Cedric. We've got Sir Smeg saying hello to everyone. Yes, it's great that you're all kind of diving in. Any questions, any comments, anything you want to talk about conventions and pop culture, dive in and we'll do what we could do to cover between now and the top of the hour. But I do want to get straight into our first guest because, like I say, it's been a very long weekend and I want to make sure that I've got at least 20 minutes of focus in me where I can actually talk to Barbara and BRYANT DILLON, who's joined us. And we have ourselves this button, which brings in our guests for today. Hello there. From FANBASE Press. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much indeed for coming on.
Likewise,
thank you
for having us.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure, because I've been a fan of the output of FANBASE Press for a while. I'm a big fan of. I mean, I've got the pages up, and I really should bring them up on the screen. But Quince, I'm a big fan of. Certainly, the sequels. I'm a huge fan of that book. We've done what we can to support FANBASE on the website as much as we possibly can. Sequels, like I say, it's certainly a big fan of us on the Convention Collective. So FANBASE, it's certainly a publisher that we love and respect, because you really do look for individual stories, and that's what is really something that is needed in comics, and it's great that you support that. Fantastic. So, I mean, I think the first question that I really want to get into. Oh well, let's first introduce yourself, I suppose. This is, I mean, if you could talk about. I mean, it's nearly coming up to 10 years of FANBASE. Talk about how the FANBASE got started.
Sure, absolutely. So for those that may be unfamiliar with FANBASE Press, we are a comic book publisher as well as a geek culture site. And ultimately, our mission is to both celebrate fandoms and create new ones. So by that, I mean that we are fans ourselves. So we have fandoms that we enjoy. We acknowledge that there are many fandoms outside of our own knowledge, but we want to support others in their love and celebration of fandom. So what we do is that we have an entire staff and contributors all across the US that do daily reviews, interviews. We have a whole podcast network that helps other creators to give voice to their ideas, their stories, and their projects, even if they are not published by FANBASE Press. But we do publish our own comics, as you mentioned. Kinsei, the sequels, we've been publishing for almost 10 years. 2020 will be 10 years. But as you mentioned, the big thing for us is, number one, always to provide a platform for the creator to tell their story. So we're not looking to bring them on and then completely divert the course of the story they're telling. And number two, we want the stories themselves to be something that readers can really connect with, the messages and the deeper meaning behind the stories. And they really need to have resonating characters that readers of all kinds can identify with.
Sure. I mean, I think the thing that I take away from FANBASE is that huge the online presence, that you started as an online site. It's somewhere, the internet is where you feel a little bit more natural and more comfortable when it comes to reaching out to your audience. And the reason why I wanted to talk to you is, of course, the rise of indie and small press, and the rise of comics as a personal and a very individual medium. But it's that connection with the fans, and you've made that connection on an online basis, but you've also got to have that face-to-face as well. So let's talk about the convention experience for yourselves. I mean, were you going to conventions before? I mean, what were you getting up to?
We had gone to some conventions before. I guess it's weird. I had never. I guess both of us had never really gone to any comic conventions prior to.
That is not true.
Oh, I'm sorry. I won't speak for you. You had your own. I had never gone to any comic conventions prior to stepping into self-publishing. I had read about a lot of them as comic book fans, but I think stepping into self-publishing caused me to volunteer for San Diego Comic-Con, and so it was sort of tied for me to comic creating, but I also had completely the fan experience where I went to San Diego Comic-Con once, having heard rumors for years, and the moment I was on the floor for the first time, I was just like, I am never not being here again. This is my place. But I think that is honestly what has helped Barbara and I in regards to the convention scene with our company, is that we really. The convention scene, as you were mentioning just a little while ago, it can be a rough time. You're having a lot of fun. There's a lot of great experiences, but you come out the other side sometimes from a show, and you're just ready to sleep for 48 hours, because it can be exhausting. And so I think Barbara and I have really benefited from the idea of enjoying the conventions both as fans and creators. We're able to maintain some of our motivation, even if it's a slower show, or we've been at shows every weekend for maybe like 3 or 4 weeks in a row, and it's starting to grate a little bit, but we still get excited about like cool cosplay, or seeing a friend we haven't seen in a while, or some huge announcement happening that we're really excited about. So I think helping maintain that fan love, both as a fan and a creator, helps navigate a busy convention scene. Sure.
I mean, is it also a place for people, creators, to actually speak face to face to you and do that whole pitch thing, and introducing their stories to you at conventions? Has there been any experiences of that?
Well, I'll let Barbara talk about that, because she's the editor-in-chief for our company. She handles a lot of the people that come up to the booth and actually say, "Hey, I've got a story."
Yeah, I think that conventions are always going to be an opportunity for networking, for meeting new creators of any kinds, whether you are an artist or a writer looking for another member of your creative team, or if you're seeking out publishers and editors at different booths to submit your work or do a portfolio review. So we are always happy to accept new submissions for projects at any state of the development process. And we work with creators from anywhere from the germ of an idea all the way to comics or graphic novels that are near completion and maybe just need a little bit of a further push before we actually publish. So we are always happy to hear pitches. We are always happy to chat with creators, even if it's something, again, that we're not going to publish. We want to be able to find an ability or a platform to give them voice, whether it's through publishing, whether it's through promotion on our site, or chatting and interviewing with one of our creators. So I would say to aspiring creators out there, never be afraid, as challenging as that can be, because I completely understand that anxiety that a lot of people have. I have it myself, even at a convention. I have to kind of pump myself at the beginning of every morning of conventions just to say, like, it's going to be okay. So I completely empathize with being nervous or having anxiety about approaching individuals at a con. But if I can offer that it's such a safe space to do so, and you're in the company of really like-minded individuals. So it's definitely a place to, if you have that ability, if you can psych yourself up to do it, I'd say go for it.
Absolutely. I mean, we had a couple of creators on last week who were exhibiting at Thought Bubble in Harrogate this weekend. And certainly one of the things that we were talking to them about was, especially as independent and self-published creators, at the end of the day, being behind that table, you have to become a bit of a salesperson. You have to sell your books to the person that's coming up and maybe not familiar with the work, familiar with the publisher, and you have to kind of instantly become that sort of, like, I'm not going to say huckster. That sounds wrong, but certainly you have to get into that sales mode, and I think that's a big challenge. And I'm guessing, Barbara, you are certainly a little bit more, maybe the gift of gab, certainly the person to kind of approach people.
It depends. Bryant definitely has his own strengths. I think that as a partnership, what Bryant really brings to it is in-depth knowledge as a writer and artist himself of the sequential art medium, and really developing the actual content with creators. So, but he's a huge fan himself. I mean, he's been a lifelong comics fan. He's a huge fan of the Aliens franchise and Jurassic Park, all different kinds of things. So sometimes we recognize, like you were saying, whenever a creator or a customer approaches the booth, every time someone new approaches, you have to really treat that as this is a new person, and they may not be familiar with the company, they may not be familiar with their titles, and you, as challenging as it can be, you really have to bring that same level of energy to each individual person. And sometimes you might recognize off the bat, maybe you don't have something that appeals to them genre-wise or age group-wise, target audience, but that doesn't mean that you can't still have a conversation with that person. You can't still geek out with them about whatever their fandom might be, or just answer questions. We have a lot of creators that come up to the booth that are first-time creators that are just unfamiliar with how the comics industry works. And you never know, honestly, that's sometimes the part of the publisher of realizing you may not make a sale right then and there, but by building genuine and authentic relationships with people at conventions, you may have a lifetime or lifelong fan of your company, of the site, just by being genuine and by being a person and recognizing that the person in front of you is the same. So for us, sometimes it may not always be about the hard sell. We're definitely not hard sell people, but sometimes it's just realizing, hey, this is just a person, they have questions, and I'm happy to be here for them.
Well, and it's something that you were mentioning, I think earlier, that there's a connection between that and social media.
Sure.
When we approach social media, especially because, and not everyone's has the same exact goals, but for us, we are trying to build an audience as much as we're trying to achieve sales. They're part of what Fanbase Press is about, creating a community, a place where people can enjoy fandoms, and it's not just the stuff we're creating, it's also the stuff we're discussing and analyzing as lovers of geekdom and storytelling. And so that same stuff, when we're putting out social media blasts or interacting with people on social media, I would recommend creators have to think of it, as we've said before in panels, you think of it almost like a dinner party. If you just were to walk up to someone at a dinner party and be like, hey, I made a book, will you buy it? They're going to be like, what is wrong with this person? Or just think that you only want them for that one thing, that you're so goal-oriented that you don't consider them as an individual. If you go up and ask them a few questions and get to know them and then happen to mention, oh, by the way, I'm also an author, I have this book, that individual is going to care a lot more about what you have done yourself, because you have shown that you respect them as an individual, that you've shared some experiences, you're interacting with them as a person. And so that's really our goal, both online and at a convention. We do have to keep some goals in mind. Sales are important, especially because conventions can be very expensive. You need to be able to pay for that table. But the goal when someone comes up to the table for us isn't automatically like sale number one. It's to make that person have a positive experience and walk away going, hey, you know what? I like Fanbase Press. If I didn't buy a book, I might want to check them out online. I might want to tell someone about them or whatever. But that could end up being, as Barbara said, much better than like we selling one book, having an individual go around and say, hey, I met this great geeky company that you should check out, to 5 or 6 other individuals could be way more valuable.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's what leads me on to the next question, because certainly here in the UK, we are seeing over the last couple of years a real resurgence in small press, self-published, basically the steering away from the big two, perhaps, or even everything beyond the big two. I mean, we spoke about this on a recent episode where at New York Comic Con, the likes of Dark Horse and Image and all the companies beyond the big two were rising up, even having a bigger feel and a bigger presence than those big two. It's almost like the big two had their time, and this is the time for new and individual stories. Mm-hmm. Is that a similar thing that's happening in the States at the moment? Is there a similar rise of self-publishing and small press?
I do think so. And honestly, I really think that the driving or underlying force behind that is that those publishers that you mentioned, the Dark Horses, the IDWs, the Image, and even smaller companies like ourselves or other companies, Alterna, they are really doing what perhaps, not to say that Marvel and DC are completely not, or that they're avoiding. I think that they're making strides in that direction, but I think that those other publishers that I mentioned are really doing their due diligence to bring diverse and inclusive voices to not only the creative teams, but the stories that they're telling. And I think for a long, long time, that is what audiences of all kinds have voiced as something that they want to see. They want to see stories that mirror their lives, or that characters that look like them. And I think that that is the benefit of independent publishers or creator and publishing companies.
It's pretty much where it started, isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly.
And driving that charge.
Yeah, we have that freedom to do so, albeit it is more challenging for smaller publishers or for independent creators to share those stories sometimes, because they have to really pound the pavement, like you were saying, in a duality of both online and at conventions. But at the same time, there is such a desire for those types of stories from those types of creators that it's really making an impact, and it's such a good thing to see that happening.
Excellent. I think we've got a couple of questions that have come in on the chat, so we'll dive into a couple of those. First up, I think, is more of a comment. This is Aaron Neighbours saying, "Love what FANBASE Press is all about." Ah, you see the smiles there. We know, Aaron. We love that. We gave them a shout out when I was interviewed recently by Comic Con Newbie. So, yep, the love is out there with everyone, a lot of fans. We've also got this question as well from Sir Lister of Smeg, and I do like this question. As a publisher who also gathers information for the info site, what do you see as the biggest hurdle facing creators trying to make a comic?
That's a really good question.
That's a big question, yeah.
That is a big question. You know, for me, I think sometimes, I think it's just the knowledge of how to actually make a comic. And I say that only because what is great is that we're seeing tons of new creators who have never made a comic book before. They perhaps are writers, but they've not worked in the sequential art medium, or they're artists looking to join up with writers, but they just don't know what the process looks like. And sometimes all that you know is, oh, do I have to go to the big two? Do I have to submit to Marvel and DC? Otherwise, I can't be a comic book creator. And I think that's part of why we created FANBASE Press, is to show, hey, there are tons of talented comic book creators out there. We just have to join together and form a community that can educate them about how to do so, what are the mechanics about doing so, how can you find other creators. And honestly, what's been great, and Brian, if you want to speak to this as well, but what's been great that we've seen in the past 10 years is that finances they used to be a huge barrier for creators. And now, because of things like digital comics, Comixology, there are so many different online platforms that don't require you to put in as much financial capital into the project to print it or to get it out there. So I think that I'm glad to see that there are more platforms to make it possible.
Yeah, it's definitely. Oh, good.
No, go ahead, please. No.
Oh, wait, I was just saying it's definitely more accessible. You know, kind of like YouTube has helped democratize filmmaking a bit. I think that the same has happened with, as Barbara was saying, digital and webcomic. I think the challenge, honestly, when I think of the biggest challenge is, because a lot of people are taking advantage of the indie comic scene, is creators coming to terms with the amount of time that comics take. It is faster compared to some other mediums. I know a lot of filmmakers come to comics, or writers from film come to comics because they feel like they can get a comic made quite faster than they can get a movie made. But it's still
that's a bit of a rude awakening.
Yes, but and I mean, you know, it's a great artist will, you know, be able to do a page or two a day. But most people that you're working with when you're starting out are not going to be, you know, at the top of their game and also only working as an artist. And you probably won't be able to pay them the full amount for the art. And so it just becomes a thing of having to realize that it might take a while for you to allow the actual book to be created. I know that for our first book, it took over a year from start to finish. And a lot of that was just us giving time to the artist so that during his lunch breaks and his weekends and his nights, he could hand paint each panel, you know, and the book turned out fantastic, but it really is that it's a long game sometimes, you know, and you do have to work. I guess you just have to come to terms with the idea of like, hey, there's no way to rush through this. I might find a good artist, but they only can go so fast, you know.
Sure. I mean, I think also, I mean, we kind of touched on this when you were talking, Barbara, about that kind of educating someone that perhaps is coming up to you at the booth, and you can actually explain to them the mechanics of putting a book out, and actually what, as publishers, what you're looking for in terms of something that is going to sell at the end of the day, and the kind of ability to talk to new creators and kind of bring your experience to bear. And I think that face-to-face thing at a convention, that really helps sell the message. I mean, you can email left, right, and center, but to actually talk to someone face-to-face and actually talk them through that kind of process, I think that's very important. So we've got Sarita P that is jumping in and asking a question. This is actually a question we've asked a couple of creators, and it's a good one. Is a small con better chance to be seen as to a big con where you might be bypassed because of size? this is a good question because there was a couple of friends of mine that celebrated a memory that they had taken their book. And when I say taken their book, one book, and they took it to San Diego Comic-Con.
Okay.
That is like dropping a pebble into a huge torrent of water and just hoping that things get seen.
Yes.
So a smaller con, is that somewhere where a creator can get more traction?
I would say yes and no. I think that if you are a creator who is just starting out, and I wouldn't even say that there's any negativity towards taking that one singular book. If you've never been to a con before, if you've never been to a con as a creator, there's no right or wrong to anything that you do, and that's something that we try to educate creators about. You do what you can within your means, and there's nothing wrong with that. There is no definitive way to success.
There's been many times people have told us you can't do it like that, and then we did it, and it was fine.
So, but I think that you're going to learn from those experiences that, perhaps maybe taking one singular book and walking to different tables isn't the best means to do so. Maybe you won't reach as many people as to actually having a table, but if you don't have the means to have a table yet, or you're not sure how to do so, that's totally fine. When you are a creator and you're looking to sell and you're looking at which conventions to attend, sometimes it's good to start small because then it's not as overwhelming. You can make those early mistakes. And again, there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. You can always learn from everything that you do. But sometimes it's a little easier if financially you make those mistakes early on so that you're not going to a Thought Bubble or a San Diego Comic-Con right off the bat and putting up a great deal of capital up front. So I would say that sometimes when you're making a name for yourself, when you're learning what to do, small cons are great. Yeah, no,
I would sort of agree mostly with what Barbara's saying. I think that there is a duality to them. We had times that we went to San Diego Comic-Con because we only had one or two books, and we went because there was an opportunity that happened, and we had to, again, kind of come to terms with the fact, hey, we're going here. We're probably not going to sell a ton because we aren't going to be the driving force for what people are looking at this convention. But you're exposed to so many people, and you might meet that one person who has some sort of connection that helps you down the road. So that a large con is good for those opportunities that you're going to have such a wide amount of people potentially looking at your product. But as as Barbara's saying, when you're starting out, the small cons are the bread and butter. We made our first couple of years by going to cons that either were low cost or local, might have a small attendance, or maybe they're only one a day or part of a day. Might be more of a signing that is like a mini convention at a shop or something like that. But what happens with that is if you start doing those, you can do more of them for less money, as Barbara was saying. But you also establish yourself as a individual comic creator in that community. Not only will fans see you at various events, but other creators will start to see you, and by showing up, by being there, by interacting with other creators, you become part of that creative community, and that helps because then people just start accepting you to some degree. They're like, oh, well, that person is an indie creator. They're part of the indie creator scene here in this town, and you can slowly grow from there.
Sure. I think a question that kind of panded off what you were saying, because you had the opportunity to go to San Diego Comic-Con pretty early in the formation of FANBASE. That opportunity came about. Did that give some legitimacy to FANBASE to appear at a show like San Diego Comic-Con? Because then you can turn around and say, we had a presence at that show.
I do think so, honestly. Even if I think the interesting thing is that any opportunity that you can take advantage of, whether it be attending a large convention, whether it be doing a signing, the funny thing is, even if having even been doing this for 10 years, we've had signings at local comic book shops and one person shows up. But from going back to the idea of online versus in person, from an online perspective, if you take a photo of yourself and your booth at a comic book shop and say, hey, we're here, we're doing this, from a perspective of users online, it looks like, hey, they're pounding the pavement, they're having signings because there are creators that don't get to the opportunity to do signing. So I think it's kind of like a cognitive reframing of, you know, it may not be successful in terms of finances. It may not be successful in terms of reaching, you know, blowing up overnight.
Sure.
But I think that if you can always find the positive in what can I take away from this that is going to benefit me as a creator, and educate myself about the experience, and how can I use this as an opportunity to, even though it may not be true, to use it as an opportunity to say, hey, it looks like I'm doing things. I am trying.
It's not like we're necessarily saying, hey, go ahead and like make up stuff. It's more just that, like, hey, like there's a positive spin to every experience you have. Just because you go there and no one shows up, or you don't sell as much as you want, or you don't earn your table, you don't have to share that with the world unless you want to. It can, and so you don't need to go out and say, oh, I had the best time ever and sold out. But you can say, hey, we were at this convention. Thanks for having us, you know? And for many people, they will just see it like, oh, I see you going to you're at this show, you're at that signing, you're at this convention. And they have this perception of you being involved in that community, being active.
Sure.
And that does transfer and add legitimacy to your business and your creative identity, I would say.
Because, and again, I think it's simply celebrating, like Bryant was saying, it's not that we're intending to give a false persona in any way, shape, or form, but I think it's the idea that you never know how much your work is going to impact other people. Because even if you put in all of that work and effort, not only to make your product, but to forge relationships with comic book shops, to go and set up, to put in your time and energy to be there, someone, a new creator or someone who's been in the business for a while might see that online and might think, wow, I haven't had the ability to do that for myself, but you know what, that inspires me to go and do that. So I'm going to do that too. And I'm a huge Mr. Rogers fan, so I always utilize his teachings, but it's really true that you never know the impacts that you have, not only on those that you meet in everyday lives, but on those that you never meet. So you never know how the things that you do are going to positively help others.
Cool. We do have some more questions.
Yes.
But I mean, off the back of that, I mean, you're reaching the 10-year anniversary in 2020 of FANBASE. I mean, if you could go back and talk to Bryant and Barbara back in 10 years ago, what would be what's been the biggest thing that you've taken and learnt from certainly your convention experience over those 10 years?
This is like a FANBASE Press dark fate.
Yes.
What message do we bring from the future?
Honestly, I think the funny thing is I don't regret anything that we've done. We've certainly, like every other creator, tried things that didn't work or made mistakes that we've learned from. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. And so I don't know that necessarily I would go back and say anything differently other than to encourage, keep trying, keep working at it. It's exhausting, but it's worth it. And if it's something that you love and it's something you're passionate about, then there's no reason that you shouldn't try.
Cool. Excellent stuff. Oh,
no, I would just say the same thing. So let's go with the next question.
Fair enough. Right, the questions that are coming in, there's a couple of really good ones in here.
Sure.
This one's come from Sunny from s07e09. Is digital in the future? I mean, it's saying is digital in the future, and do you want that? But that is somewhere. I mean, you publish on Comixology.
Yes.
It's the online platform is something that you've very much embraced. Where's your audience? Do you feel for FANBASE? Is it more the actual physical comic in people's hands, or are you seeing a very strong digital online presence for your books?
I will say it's mostly the physical books. We we appeal to a lot of different readers, but it seems like when we look at our audience, the majority want to have the physical published product now. and that, honestly, I find myself in that situation very often. But I also feel like that might be a generational thing that eventually changes.
Sure.
So we're not afraid of digital comics. We think that they need to be embraced like every new medium. I don't know of any time that I believe where I can think of an art medium or any medium being like, well, we don't want the future and the future going away. The future always eventually arrives. So I think it's better for the comic community to embrace it and figure out how to make it work. It seems like the main... Go ahead.
No, I was about to say, I mean, we've had a couple of interviews recently, and there's a couple of publishers that we like to support on the site, which are taking some real risks with the way that they're publishing and in using the digital medium, such as TKO. I quite like their idea of putting out their first issues for free, and then you buy the whole lot. It's just, it's not something that you would then just learn over time. You get the chance to just hit the whole thing in one go.
Well, you know,
publishers that take those chances, I think, are very bold.
I think that that makes a lot of sense. That kind of is our mentality, is that Netflix and streaming have kind of taught people that they want all of it at once, and there is something there. For us, what we've done is, because we just don't have the physical means or the financial means to do single issues, you know, and then do a trade as well. Single issues tend to be really a hard sell for indie publishers. And so, you know, the drop-off obviously happens as you get away from issue 1, 2. So we do that all digitally now. We're able to use the digital release month to month in the lead up to the trade as both a marketing tool and a way to engage those digital consumers. And it's a great payoff. And I feel like digital comics will find their place as we go forward. They still, you know, there's a lot of things that they could be. TKO is one avenue, but it really, like, unless the price point changes or something happens with Diamond, I feel like we don't know exactly where they're going yet.
Yeah, excellent stuff, and good points as well. Andrew is kind of following on to that, and we'll get back to the conventions part of the conversation. But this is certainly about the release and the ability to get comics out there. This is off the back of Sarita's question. Andrew is asking, does digital have a legacy problem? Like 40 years down the road, no one is going to pay $50,000 on a digital product as it was the first downloaded copy. That's not how it works.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I think that's very much a question that is leading into some real story. I mean, it's like the old idea of artists creating physical work, which would then go on to, they can use that to sell at a convention. It's very difficult to sell a Cintiq with a bunch of files on it. So, it's a good question.
That is a good question. I think, honestly, because comics, even though we are huge fans of them and we do know them to be a huge market in their own right, I think that perhaps going forward, they may continue to be somewhat of a quote unquote niche market. And so perhaps like albums or LPs, there's always going to be a market for the printed copy, because some audiences just will always want that physical version of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think as the main body of the readership ages, so too will we lean more towards digital. I think just because the younger generations right now they're just digital, everything is so ingrained in their daily lives. Every time we do have an iPad at our table that we sometimes preview digital comics on, we sometimes use as a newsletter. I am constantly fascinated by how quickly younger audience members just come up and they know exactly what to do. They can be 3 years old and they just know exactly how to use the iPad. They're fluent.
They're not worried about the comic. They're just like, oh, something I can check out. What apps do you have? Okay.
So I think that it's just going to be the ebb and flow of generational change. I think that as we age and we have less room in our homes, we may not always be able to pick up printed copies of every single thing that we want to purchase for space purposes. But I think it's something that will just change. I think that just as we're seeing with DVDs, just as we're seeing with CDs, I think that physicality of it will simply just kind of go away.
The real thing that might change, or reply to this question, is I feel like physical art is going away already, quickly. So we are going to have less comics that are physical in that way, and so it might in some ways even make the collector market more profitable, because it will become so much more rare for an individual to take the time to do that art physically, and therefore to be those physical art pages to sell.
Absolutely. I think it's also, I mean, we're talking about the generational thing, and this leads back to the comics conversation, because we have talked with several people in the past about the audience that they're seeing in front of them at comic conventions. Who are the kind of audience that come up to you, and what's the kind of age ranges that come up to, certainly to the fan base table?
We see all different ages, and that's something purposefully that we've tried to craft our catalog of titles, as well as that we want to appeal to all different fandoms. We want to appeal to all different types of individuals, all different age groups. So we reflect that within the stories that we choose to publish and the creators that we choose to work with. But on a whole, at conventions, I love the melting pot of individuals that I see at cons. I see everyone from infants to individuals of an older age, and it's wonderful, and it's inspiring, and it's not just age, it's not just different racial groups, it is sexual orientation, it is gender identity, it is just absolutely differing abilities, both physical and neurological. And I think that, again, just going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, that is what makes stories and the comics industry even more interesting and even more exciting, is that we are seeing that inclusivity. We are hearing different stories, even with characters that we've lived with for 70 years. We're now seeing different takes on them by different creators who just have a different lived experience and lived perspective. So it's definitely an exciting time for everybody.
Cool. Well, as an individual of older age, as you refer to, yes, that would be me. And it's a pleasure to, I mean, certainly I saw it this weekend myself as well, to have kids showing up at conventions, and they're not just being dragged in by mum and dad. They are there, and they're really getting into comics as a something physical for them, and it's great for new generations to take up comics, and that's always a pleasure. Let's go very quickly through a couple of quick fire questions. We've got Aaron, who's asking, what do this is to Fanbase, how do they qualify what stories to publish? Is there anything that kind of a nugget of what the kernel of what Fanbase produces?
You know, as Barbara was saying earlier, I think it's really impactful characters, or impactful stories, and resonating characters. Those would be the two things we really look for, and a connection, some sort of heart or connection to the story, something that appeals to both of us that way.
Fair enough. We've got a question from Leanne D. Are you having any issues with the new tariffs, or do you print your books in the US?
We don't. Yeah, that's something
that's leading here in the UK as well, because it's that we're finding a lot of publishers are now having to publish further afield just to afford it while they're doing it.
Yes. So we used to print in the US. We actually work with a wonderful, a wonderful printer called Print Ninja now, who's based in the US. However, they print in China. We have had a lot of anxiety about this as of late, especially this year with upcoming projects. But Print Ninja has assured us that the tariffs are not affecting any of their printing, their shipping, the way they do business. As of yet,
we've got that's been kind of the thing. Is there's an axe waiting to drop over the head of the publishing industry.
It's definitely a big source of anxiety for us.
I don't doubt it. I really don't. Solicitor Smeg is asking, do you think Marvel and DC rely on their old characters too much, and that could lead them falling out of the top 2 publisher spots at some point?
That is a really good question.
That's a real big industry question.
That is.
I don't think they do. Like, I think that it's unfortunate because they tell a lot of the same stories, but I feel like people, unfortunately, the consumers buying those Superman, those Batman books, those X-Men books. So I feel like there's a complexity there of they're trying to do what they think's right to survive and serve their audience, but hopefully those independent publishers will fill in the holes.
And I don't want to do any disservice to, we know a lot of creators that work with Marvel and DC who are really trying to get that inclusivity and diversity with regard to representation of the stories they're telling and the characters they're using and introducing. But sometimes it's such a complex issue, and not to place blame on any one individual or mechanism or consumer, but sometimes it's hard with the existing diamond distribution system and the way that pre-ordering works, and that many customers in the comics industry have no idea about pre-ordering, have no idea that they have to pre-order in order to guarantee the success of comics. So sometimes, even though a new comic might try to introduce a new character or a new storyline, if it's not hitting the same numbers as a tried and true Superman character or something like that, unfortunately it goes away. And again, not to place blame on consumers, that you have to understand the pre-order process, because it is so complicated and kind of convoluted. But it's such a complicated and nuanced thing as to why, unfortunately, we're not seeing more new storylines and more new characters.
Sure. I mean, for myself, I mean, I personally think, yes, we are seeing a lot of those legacy characters constantly being either revived or republished and brought and retold, but there's stories and characters which can survive that deconstruction.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, it's the reason why the new X-Men books are working really well. It's the reason why the Superman Year One from Frank Miller is on my pull list. It's something that is doing something interesting with the character.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're wanting new characters, they're out there in books like the ones that you're bringing out, and that's the reason why the small press and indie scene is growing, and there is that resurgence now. The characters are there, and I think that's it. It just shows the strength of the art form more than anything.
Right.
So absolutely. This one's a big and important question, so please bear with us on this one. Yes to pineapple on pizza. Sorry, the question: pineapple or pizza? Yes or no? This is from
course,
Into the
yes.
Mister.
Of course,
yes.
No.
Barbara, okay, so that's a vote either way.
Pizza.
I'm going to abstain. I'm going to stay out of this argument, but I will say that deep pan is a pie, thin crust all the way. There you go. That's all I can
I
just
can
weigh
agree
in on
with
that
that.
one. There we go. Excellent stuff. So, listen, thank you so much indeed for coming on.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I think the first thing is to talk about upcoming cons. Let's keep the conversation about that. Where are you going to be showing up? Is there any more for 2019, or is that you done for the year?
So we're actually done for the year, but the first con of 2020, I'm going to grab a book right here for physical visual aid. We are going to be at Long Beach Comic Expo in Long Beach, California in January 11th to 12th, because very excitingly, as part of our 10th anniversary, we are putting out a hardcover edition of our series Quince. Quince is about a little girl who gets superpowers on her quinceañera, but she only has them for the year she's 15. We originally did it digitally in both English and Spanish. This new hardcover that we're putting out in January is going to have both versions, the English and Spanish, and it'll be very much like the free comic book day comics, where one side has the English, the other side has the Spanish, so you can just flip it over.
Yeah, like a flip book,
That's cool.
Yeah, but that will be our first con of the year.
Okay. Anything that you can announce for later on in the year? Is there any cons that you have got lined up?
Yeah, we'll definitely be at WonderCon. We will be at San Diego.
Hoping, pending confirmation.
Yes, pending confirmation. If everything goes right, one way or another, we will be at San Diego. Whether we're exhibiting or we're just there, doing press and having a great time, we will be at San Diego. Other than that, I don't know if there are any that we have locked in. Have we locked in any other ones?
Not quite yet. It's that fun time of year where you put in the applications and then you just wait for everything to be approved.
Dan Berry's saying Long Beach, I believe. Is that Long Beach?
Yes.
He's saying, okay, so there you go.
Yeah, we should be at Long Beach. Yeah,
cool. We'll definitely be there.
Excellent stuff. Well, I mean, lots of people are going to be looking forward to seeing FANBASE at cons, because certainly when Dan Berry has been catching up with you, he's always someone that makes a beeline for your booth.
We very much appreciate it.
No worries. And we'll continue to showcase creators from FANBASE on the site. Absolutely. Where can people find out more about FANBASE and about the books?
Sure. So you can find us at fanbasepress.com. We're on all of the social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, iTunes, YouTube, everything except MySpace. So anywhere you want to find us, we're likely there.
You see, you're letting a big audience just
right by.
I don't know why. Jack, sorry.
Listen, thank you so much indeed for coming on. I know it's early morning in the US on your side of the pond, but thank you very much indeed for taking time out your Sunday to talk to us.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
No worries. Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Excellent. So there you go. That was great to talk to them. That was indeed Barbara and Bryant. Barbara and Bryant Dillon from FANBASE Press. Do check them out, because they are very much worthwhile checking. All of the books from their line. I'm a big fan, and we do our best to cover them on theconventioncollective.com as well. So excellent stuff indeed. Right. The conversation is about pizza at the moment. Thank you very much indeed for that. Keep it going on the chat by all means. But if you do want to dive into the other things we want to talk about, by all means, because we do want to get into a couple of things. First things first, I do want to talk about Thought Bubble and bring my kind of thoughts to bear on the last couple of days. Certainly over the last couple of weeks, we have been talking about this con and talking about what it means to the comics centric convention scene here in the UK. It doesn't deal with any kind of the rest of the pop culture detritus. It's all about international talent. It's about legacy UK talent. It's about indie and small press, and it's all about comics. We were talking about this morning in the line about the way that the scene here in the UK has shifted more towards the mixed media, and that the comic-centric shows have kind of faded away. And we were asking, is there any other show like Thought Bubble and of its scale here in the UK? And to be fair, we just couldn't think of one. London Super Comic Con, maybe, but that's kind of gone by the wayside. Certainly after a couple of years of really struggling to get an audience, Thought Bubble seems to have gotten the kind of the formula right, and they've managed to nail it down. Certainly being in the middle of the country helps, because you can pull from the Scottish audience, you can pull from a crowd across the country. It gets people out of the capital as well. It reminds everyone that there is more to the British scene than just London. So that's all well and good, but moving out of Leeds into Harrogate, I had concerns. And certainly with the way that the con had evolved, certainly when it had moved into the city centre, because it was dealing with some very big tents, 4 of them, maybe 5 venues around the city centre, which kind of meant when people had 20, 25 quid in their pocket, when they walked through that first tent, and the curation level of Thought Bubble was so high, people were looking at those first couple of tables and going, maybe there's someone even better just a little bit further down. I better hold off on spending my money just yet. Let me just check the rest of the tent out first. Holy crap, they're really good as well. Maybe I'll miss something a little bit further down the line. 4 tents later, and all of that walking, they end up not going back, and the money didn't really translate to sales over the table. Here at the convention centre in Harrogate, it's 3 rooms, it's under 1 roof, it's self-contained. There's no, I mean, Harrogate was incredibly lucky this weekend anyway. I know that we had the flooding on Thursday and Friday, but it was incredibly clear and crisp, and relatively clear skies on over the Saturday and Sunday, which meant the weather outside was great anyway. So lots of people coming into the convention centre, but it was self-contained, which means that people could just wander around, wander down to the back of the 3rd hall, wander back, and they could see and quickly get a sense of people that they wanted to come back to and put money over the table. And that meant books were being sold, comics were being put into the hands of people, and the people on the other side of the table were very grateful of that that money being exchanged, and the sales were up, certainly from what people were talking about, certainly from last year. Other parts of that convention centre which kind of freaked a couple of people out, because they weren't held in tents this year, it did mean that it was a little bit like the New Dock experience at the Royal Armouries, where there was no natural sunlight, which meant you had no real sense of how the day time was passing. People were kind of thinking, okay, I know that it's a 6 o'clock finish for the Saturday, but it's okay, it's 10 to 5, we'll be fine. Holy crap, it's 2 o'clock. It turned into that very strange sense of a time warp. You didn't quite get a sense of it, but that really meant that you can kind of wander around and see more of what was going on. The international guest level was incredible. I mean, if you only have to go to the Thought Bubble website to see name after name, Brian Azzarello, Donny Cates, the Wigdiv team, which were all there as well. It wasn't just Jamie McKelvey and Kieran Gillen. It was Matt Wilson as well, which meant he was catching up on all those signatures of people who had gotten the other 2, the artist and writer. Finally, it was time for the colorist to shine. So there was them, and also Dee Cunliffe as well, who was the flatter. So you had the entire team. You had the likes of who else? I mean, Kev Walker was there. You had Dave Gibbons in the back corner, and that was great as well, because they also programmed tables at the back corner of the the second hall, people weren't just kind of getting to the first hall and stopping. They were checking out the entire building. I had concerns, and they were completely dispelled. This remains the show for comics fans here in the UK. Thought Bubble absolutely knocked it out of the park this weekend. It was so much fun. The vibe in the room was really positive. Everyone was feeling very energized by the books they were seeing, because also we are seeing a number of publishers here in the UK and printers doing great jobs on putting some really quality books out there for the indie and small press. So that was being represented as well. Some really colourful booths. So that was great. And the democratization of the halls as well is something that came from the original Thought Bubble shows 5-6 years ago. You had the likes of Spurrier and some really big names next to people who had either just created their first comics or were just getting into getting their books out into audiences. And it was side by side, and there was a real democratization of the entire building, which was cool. A couple of niggles, certainly when it came to the signing room. Perhaps there was a little bit of line management. New building, it's something that can perhaps be evolved for the next year. Just little things that people can learn about the organization of Thought Bubble. Maybe we could have done with a couple more water fountains, because it was a new building. It is a dedicated convention space. It wasn't as cold as like the tents were in the Leeds City Centre. It was a little bit more self-contained, which means everyone was dehydrating very, very quickly. So a couple more water fountains could have been great. Some more places for people to sit and kind of recharge the batteries. But these are things that you learn from a new venue. So it's still something that will evolve. Will it return to Harrogate? I don't see why it shouldn't. It is 45 minutes out of Leeds. There is that train service that goes straight from Leeds to Harrogate. So it is a pretty accessible area. It's not the worst looking part of the country. It's a lovely little, well, it's not a lovely little town. It is a pretty big town. It's very much a Bath town. In other words, it's one of those kind of Victorian historic towns. So expect to go into plenty of places where it looks like a Ms. Marple murder mystery venue from the outside. A couple of cracked cornings in places. It's not somewhere that's going to be modernized anytime soon. But that also provides that sense of history, that sense of grandeur to Thought Bubble. And I think that's something that also grew really nicely out of it. I really enjoyed it. I was stunned at the ability for me to take a number of books and get 5 or 6 signatures on there. It really was packed to the gills with some amazing talent. Like I say, I had some reservations and they were completely dispelled this time round. Thought Bubble, you absolutely knocked it out of the park, and you can guarantee that I'll be there next year. So there we go. That's Thought Bubble. If there's any questions or anything that you want to ask me about that, jump on the social media, head to Englishman SDCC, ask me anything, and I'll do what I can to answer. Yes, the mid-con party was very good. The bar prices, you know what, one of my big concerns about Harrogate being a very expensive part of the world? The comic creators from London were fine. They just thought it was London prices. Everyone from Edinburgh just thought it was happy hour, which gives you an idea of how expensive the bar prices are in Edinburgh. Us Yorkshire people, a little bit more frugal. Yeah, it was expensive. It was expensive. But the music was great. The venue was fantastic. The mid-con party, everyone enjoyed. So there we go. Like I say, any questions, do jump in, and I'll do what I can to answer those on social media over the course of the next couple of days. Right. Last but not least, let's get into next week. This was announced on Monday of last week. We are going to be having the badge sale for open registration for San Diego Comic-Con, and that is going to take place on Saturday, the 16th of November. Again, it's something that San Diego Comic-Con are doing to make sure that those badge sales happen as soon as possible before Christmas, get that rush out of the way, and also allow people to kind of budget as soon as they possibly can when it comes to next year's show. When it comes to the organization and the way that badge sale is going to happen, they haven't changed the model at all. We were hoping that perhaps they were going to do something with the member ID and attach it to hotel sales, perhaps. And you never know, that may still happen. But that would change, that would need the engine to change when it came to the Epic badge registration. So far, it's exactly the same as how it's been for the last 2-3 years. If you took part in the pre-registration badge sale and you're looking for additional days, you'll know what the mechanics of the badge sale is going to be. The links will be heading out in emails this week. Also, you'll find those on your member ID as well. If you are wanting to take part in the badge sale, if perhaps you have not been to San Diego Comic-Con for the last couple of years, or if it's going for the first time, this will be your opportunity. Yes, it's going to be exactly the same as we've had for the last couple of years, in that those tickets or those badges will be sold within the hour. You are going to be getting the first badges being sold certainly within the first 10 minutes or so, and you're going to be having certainly pre-registration gone within 20-25 minutes. The numbers that we've had in previous years, that's what you're going to be getting on the 16th. So if you are wanting to take part in the badge sale, you get your link. You'll be receiving that, like I say, in an email or in your member ID. You can enter the room for the waiting room for the badge sale. That takes place at 8 o'clock on Pacific time. That is for an hour. It's at 9 o'clock, sorry, get it right. 9 o'clock on the hour. You will be able to enter at any point over the course of that time frame. It's a way that certainly badge teams can start mobilizing, get your teams together. Badge teams are always, for me, the best way to maximize your possibility of getting badges. If you are not part of a badge team, head to Friends of Comic-Con, friendsofcomiccon.com, head to the forum, find yourself a Facebook group perhaps that is organizing badge teams. For me, it is the best way to kind of maximize the possibility of getting your badges. We also have ourselves, who is still looking, Andrew Dickinson. Well, at the end of the day, there's still people that are still trying to find the best methods to get badges. Once the hour is done, it starts then to be a random process by CCI, selecting from people who are in the waiting room, randomly choosing groups to enter the badge registration. Once you enter the registration, it's the same setup in that the badges that are available from the moment you enter will still be available by the end of a 15-minute period, which means there's no need to panic. Those badges will not sell while you're in the badge buying process. The ones that are available from the moment you enter will be the ones that are available when you go through the proceedings. You select for yourself and 2 friends, put in the selection that you want. If the preview night badges are available, you will be able to select those once you have selected all 4 of the available days. And then it's a case of filling in your credit card details, making sure that the mailing address is correct. It's 15 minutes. As always, the best advice, slow down, take a breath. It's 15 minutes. Just make sure that you got your card details correct, that the mailing address information is correct, that all of the badges that you're wanting to buy are the correct ones, and just take a breath. There's no rush. It's 15 minutes, so you'll be fine. Hopefully, by the end of that process, you'll have the badges that you're after, and you will be joining us in San Diego next July. But that badge sale takes place next week, and hopefully on Saturday, you will be either lucky or not. Fingers crossed for you if you are taking part in that badge sale for the first time. We are going to be doing our best to do a live stream throughout the proceedings, or certainly on the Twitter, we'll be doing our best to keep a track on how badges are selling. So any problems, as always, do screen cap them, because that is your best evidence to present to Comic-Con International. Don't share those on social media, of course, because they will be having your member ID, your code as part of the URL. Don't share those on social media. Those screen caps ideally are for any issues that you encounter and can share with CCI after the fact. They are pretty effective. They do their best over the course of a 2-3 day period to try and get through as many of the issues as they possibly can. It's just a case of wading through any problems. Over the last couple of years, it's gotten more streamlined. It's a process that works. If it's not broken, why fix it? I would have liked, or would like, to see it tied in with the member ID and with the hotel sale. Maybe that's something we'll see next year. It's something that could possibly take place. Everyone who's taking part, please do jump in with any comments and questions on the social media. Of course, anything that I can do to help. But like Sarita P says, and Aaron Neighbors says, yeah, best of luck to you if you are taking part, to all on the Open Reg. And of course, we've got Sarita P. Make sure to check that box before you purchase. Check it. Make sure that everything is going on there. Solicitor of Smeg, is it for sure that the Englishman will be there this year? Well, I've got my press badge, so yes. It's just raising money for the actual trip now, but that is the plan. I will be there. So there we go. Thank you very much indeed for all the comments. Karen Session is saying time with hotels is never going to happen. 2 different motivations. I agree, but something I think needs to change, because the badge sale itself has gotten such a streamlined setup now. We could do with that kind of streamlined engine being applied to hotel sales, because we see it every year that people don't get the rooms that they need to take part in the convention, and they end up having to kind of sacrifice their convention because they can't get the rooms that they need. It's awkward, but I'm hoping. That's all I can hope. Right. I think that's pretty much us, done and dusted. Thank you once again to Barbara and Bryant for taking part, and do check out FANBASE Press. They are a great publisher, a great website, and we are going to continue to support them and highlight all the books that they put out on theconventioncollective.com. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Next week, I do actually have a special guest lined up. Let me just head to my calendar, because I want to just make sure who it's going to be, because we've actually got guests lined up for the rest of the month, which I'm really excited to talk to. Bear with me a second, because I know that we're going to be having Red Hot Diva joining us at the end of the month, because she's going to be talking about Singapore Comic Con. That's what I am looking forward to, that one. But that's also going to be an episode where we're going to be joined by Damien Wessel from Vault Comics. Very similar conversation, I can imagine, that we've had with FANBASE, but Vault is a publisher. The trajectory and the speed in which they've really made an impact on the comic scene is just been remarkable. So looking forward to talking to Damien. Next week, we are going to be talking to Katrina Fox from Comic Sketch Art. Now, this is going to be an interesting conversation. It's a conversation I actually had here at Thought Bubble this weekend about the conversation of charging for signatures. Comic Sketch Art is a company which is an agency for comics pros, which allow them to go and administrates their appearances at conventions. They are also the ones that have introduced and certainly industrialized the sales of sketches and also autographs and signatures at conventions. Comic Sketch Art are usually the ones that are behind groups of comic professionals charging at tables. Then you have the conversation which you have with, say, Declan Shalvey, who is of the opinion once you have bought your book, that's pretty much the financial conversation done and dusted. He's just really grateful that you've done that. He'll sign anything until the cows come home. Then you have the likes of Adi Granoff, who understands that there's a value to his signature on a book. And why shouldn't he earn something from that? We're going to talk to Katrina Fox about this because at the end of the day, comic sketch art, number one, are a very important part of getting comics pros to conventions like MCM, like London Super Comic Con, and they're definitely a presence that you will have seen at certainly the bigger cons. We're going to be talking to Katrina. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. Please do join us next week, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT for that. And then, like I say, at the end of the month, we are going to be talking to Damien Wassel and also to Red Dot Diva about Singapore Comic Con. Some great guests on the way. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Back again next week, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. If you've liked the show, subscribe. Hit the notifications. It tells you when we go live each and every Sunday, and also any other random shows that we end up throwing in over the course of the week. And hopefully you'll continue the conversation. Englishman SDCC on Twitter and also on the Facebook as well, if you want to jump in on an Englishman in San Diego. Anyone that you would like us to see on a later show, anything that you would like us to cover, any conversation that you want us to have about comic conventions and the wider world of pop culture. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And from me to you, we'll see you soon. Take care.